Hey everybody, welcome to yet another Nova Scribes. It is great to have you. I'm on with Reilly Dow tonight, and if you're joining us on YouTube, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It helps us out. Let me tell you a little bit about Reilly Dow. So Reilly has been in this line of work for about the last 2 decades. More impressively, she's done this on 4 separate continents. She has a background in generative scribing, systems thinking. She's also a certified Warm Data Labs host. I have no idea what that means, but I'm hoping you'll tell us. She grew up in Canada, now lives in Mexico City with, if I've got this right, her husband, her son, and a dog named Tina. Reilly, did I forget anything?
No, that's it. That's me. Hi.
Okay, awesome. And we invited you here to be part of our what we're calling process talks. So our process talks are where we invite an accomplished practitioner with a whole bunch of experience to walk through their method, show us a little bit about their work, and kind of give us a little bit of an inside track in terms of what happens inside their head when they're doing what they do. So Riley, it is great to have you on Nova Scribes. Shall I just go ahead and pull up the slides?
Go for it. Yes,
All
thank
right,
you for having me.
no problem. It's great to have you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. All right. Usually this works. That works. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Just about.
All
There we
right,
are.
cool. So Riley, what do you got going on here?
I started with this one because it just was kind of a hilarious experience about a year ago of drawing on gigantic boards that were so gigantic that I had to borrow a ladder.
Oh,
And
cool.
that was the main thing I wanted to share about this is that that happened and we made it through. And I love production people and events people so much because they're so kind. Um, and yeah, and so I like it was a challenge of working with the space on the board because I just thought that they were going to be smaller and then they were like 10 feet tall. So we chopped
Mm,
a piece off the bottom and like made a stand, let's put it into kind of a T cross shape. Um, and then I sort of like penciled these bubble cloud shapes to draw a boundary that felt more manageable for my human size and then drew within that.
I love
Um,
it.
it was a fun one. But then they were like all displayed in this giant atrium and they actually ended up being exactly the right space for the display space. Um, so it was great.
So I heard you say that they were all displayed. So this wasn't the only one you did. You had more than just this one.
Yes, so many, many, many
Interesting.
over the course of a couple of days or so. There's, I think, a couple more slides on the same
Yeah, sure.
session.
Let's
It
take a
was
look.
quite, just you tell me what's interesting to talk about, but they were fairly technical on like carbon markets and policy and things like that. But yeah, there was something about working on a board that giant, um, like your body in relationship to the massive board that kind of
Mhm.
like changed the way the thinking felt a little bit. I don't know if you experienced that too. Like it just feels different to draw
I don't know.
on
The
it.
one thing is that for me anyway, when I work on somebody else's board, and I've never designed a board this way myself because it's annoying. But if you ever work on a board that's like floor to ceiling like that, it's one thing because to your point, you've got to find a ladder to get up high. I really hate working on the floor though. Like you have to like lay on your stomach and get really, really low.
Hmm.
So I noticed that you left yourself a little bit of a margin there. I don't suppose anybody got after you. It was like, wait a minute, you left some space down here.
No, no. And I will like say that as a thing actually that I think we can do is leave empty space.
Hmm.
Maybe that's like my main thing that I like to do is besides drawing is leave empty space because in this case it just felt like there was so much space that we like that was going to happen. And like you said, I also don't particularly enjoy lying on the floor scribing or working on
Hmm.
the floor, but it
Yeah.
also feels to me like breathing room, like room for possibility, like not maybe not everything ever has been said. So kind of is like a little signal that there's still sort of space for thinking.
Very cool. I
Hmm.
gotta ask, what are these boards made out of?
These are like an eagle cell, falcon
Okay.
board, whatever you want to call them. This was in Spain, so I had shipped from one part of Spain to a person I knew to another totally different part of Spain, and they they didn't arrive, so I had to go like get them at a warehouse and this was actually a whole thing, and like
Oh gosh.
convince a person with a van, a very nice person with a very big van, to
Well,
bring them
I'm
to the actual venue. Yeah.
I'm glad you were able to find somebody who was able to get a van. Here we go. Okay, so I have a little bit of Eagle cell right here. And if you haven't
Yes.
seen this stuff before, it's corrugated kind of the same way that cardboard is, but it's got a ever so nice surface for it. So if you can get this stuff, it's really, really nice.
Hmm.
I find it difficult to find. So, I guess you had better luck, especially when you're traveling internationally like that. There's so many things that can go wrong with that.
I
I'm glad
know.
you were able to get it.
And they did go wrong. They really did go
Oh,
wrong, but then we made it through. I will also say about Eagle Cell that I'm thrilled to have just found it in Mexico. I've never seen it here before.
very cool.
And in the lead up, working with Aaron, who you know well, to for the lead up
Hmm.
for the IAF conference, we've been trying to decide what we want to use. And we found them because it's here. The conference is here in Mexico, and so I'm really excited because it's less evil than foam core, right? It's recyclable. So
Yeah, that's the
that's
nice thing
why
about it.
Eagle Cell. Yeah, but it's equally
Mhm.
as wonderful to draw on because it's really smooth.
You have to be, I'll show you, I did a color test on this side. You have to be really, really careful with the lighter colors. They tend to fade out real quick. It tends to
Yeah.
like desaturate your markers. So
Hmm.
not to nerd out too much on material for a second, was this strong enough to hold these things up?
Yes,
Okay.
it was. It worked really well. I would totally do it again. I didn't do the cutting. Like that was the thing that if you can outsource, especially when there are going to be a lot of boards, to say to the
Hmm.
supplier, like, is this the thing you can do? Can you please make it look something like this? And I would also say that I had a lot of help because I actually couldn't, like, these are not 4x8, they were bigger than that. So I actually physically couldn't even carry them from one place to another. But yes, it was strong enough. It was a strong enough base to hold
I'm
them up.
happy to hear that. I'll have to try that. I've had a
Hmm.
challenge getting these things to stand on their own.
Hmm.
If I could nerd out a little bit on your drawings, one of the things I've always admired about your work in particular is that it seems like it's through composed. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you look at people's charts and it's kind of like popcorn. Here's an idea here,
Hmm.
here's an idea here, here's an idea here. Yours has like a continuity to the layout to it. And if I look at this, you've got sort of like your ground line here, you've got a horizon line above that. And the whole thing flows together. It doesn't look like there's just random ideas that are sprinkled all over the board. It reads really well. So how did you refine that style?
I mean, I do think it has to do with the way you think and listen. And I've had amazing sort of teachers over the year. I mean, Kelby Bird is, of course, a huge influence and a dear friend and a very important person in my life and practice.
Hmm.
And I think that her frameworks and book and her work have really kind of helped shape the thinking and the listening behind this sort of style of scribing.
Yeah.
Not that it has to look a particular way because you think a particular way, but I think for me that like I'm just interested in how things connect. And here we were talking about land and people at the center, so they're in the middle, and like human beings and in relationship to these big, like macro level policies and those kinds of things. So I
Hmm.
think where you place things and how they connect and kind of those in between connective tissue type of things are just, I find them interesting. I feel like it's something that maybe we try to balance out because we maybe don't, haven't historically focused as much there rather than like the thing and the other thing, but it's like what's between them?
Yeah, I got
Um,
you.
yeah,
I've got some follow-up questions for that, but I want to see if it might be addressed on another one of your charts. Can I move on?
you can. There's stuff in the chat. How do you want to like deal with that if you do want
Thank you. Well, mostly it's people just saying how awesome you are. One of the
to?
questions from Sarah is, which markers do you like best for board surfaces?
Yeah, I share your kind of flag on lighter colors or like water-based Neuland inks, which we love, of course, but those can sometimes not be as saturated as you might like on the boards. I was drawing directly on these. And sometimes things like acrylics or Poscas or like the permanent black Neuland, those feel great on these boards. Or kind of like stronger alcohol-based inks. But I think these were mostly Neulands, honestly. But
Hmm.
I decided on a really limited palette and then just didn't think on it any further because I like to do that.
Yeah, I'm looking. I mean, just I'm kind of squinting at this because it's sort of tiny, but it looks like you have
Yeah.
some 403 and 303, which are among the lighter colors that are there.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so it looks like you really did kind of like bigger color swaths there, just to make them stand out a bit.
Hmm.
This is a lovely treatment, by the way. That's really, really nice. An amazing space that you're in. That's so cool.
Isn't it a beautiful space? Yeah, thanks.
It's really, really cool. All right, cool. So you've got kind of a close-up of one of these. So can you kind of
Mm-hmm.
walk us through the chart, especially because this is a vertical format, right? And
Mm-hmm.
typically a graphic chart is it's more horizontal. So how did you do this?
Mm-hmm.
Was this like a top-down? Did you start in the middle? What was your approach to this one?
I did go top down on this one. There's a lot of quite tiny text on this one, so I was trying to work with hierarchy and a few like the three kind of bucket looking things in the center was an image from one of the speaker's slides, and some of it was pretty academic, and so it was like just go with the models that they are already sharing, anchor
Mhm.
it there. I added in the sort of top left, bottom right, these sort of abstract cell looking shapes. Um, and then the thing kind of in the upper right-ish corner, these kind of layers. Um, but there's like there are relatively few images actually on the board, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I went top to bottom, and the titles are extremely simple. It just felt like in order to keep up and like get in the listening zone with content like this, you
hmm
need to, keep it kind of minimal and other things, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It's a beautiful chart, and you probably had a lot of people walking up saying, "Oh, you draw so amazingly," and yet when you look at it, there's very little illustration on it.
Hmm.
It's very text heavy, and that's not a knock at all. It's what the situation called for. And so a
Yeah.
lot of people will be like, "Well, I can't be a graphic recorder because I can't draw." It's like, well, there's not a whole lot of drawing on this stuff. If you can draw a
Yeah.
kidney bean, and especially because you brought up Kelvy before. I mean, she draws kidney beans better than anybody. But it's the idea of like those sort of like blob shapes. She's got a
Yeah.
design vernacular.
Yeah.
That's very, very distinct.
Yeah.
Actually, to that point, how would you contrast your style and some of the things that you do to Kelvy's?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I could never. Kelby's Kelby.
Hmm
Yeah, she's a huge influence, but I think how do they contrast? I mean, I could only sort of wish for her mastery in terms of just color and thinking and sophistication and all the things. I do my best, and Kelby's Kelby.
I think you're being modest. I mean, I think if there's somebody that can out Kelvy, it's probably you. Sometimes when I see your charts next to each other, I'm like, okay, I know one of these is Riley's, but I can't tell which. No, you're very good. And the thing is that what's cool about it is that there's a difference between aping somebody's style, where it's like, okay, I'm going to draw like Kelvy, and
Mm,
versus I'm going to adopt this as a vernacular and
hmm
use it in order to describe what's happening in the room, right? Like, for example, I,
hmm
I, I grew up with the Grove, right? And drawing in
hmm
your style, which is all about like large landscape as metaphor. And there's going to be clouds
hmm
and mountains and rivers and things. And I find that Kelvy's and to some extent yours, it's almost like on the micro scale.
mm,
Like there's a lot of ripples and grasses, and it's like
mm,
small. And I always
mm,
attributed that to like Kelvy being around like the Walden Pond area, in
hmm
Massachusetts. I don't know if that's related or not. But like, I
mm,
mean, this is almost like a petri dish. It's almost
yeah.
like it's like the micro as the vernacular for it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I love that. I love that. I mean, I think like Kelby, I grew up in the woods in a small town
mhm.
with forests and lakes and like nature, sort of the original palette and this inspiration and yeah, those spaces. But I think it's really interesting what you're saying about this kind of like zoom in, zoom out, like
hmm
could be the same metaphor in a way, like same landscape, but how, what level of scale are you talking about? And then
Right,
you draw
right.
from that. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's not mountains and clouds and valleys and canyons, is it pebbles? Is it streams? Is it ripples? Is it like
hmm
little eddy currents? Yeah.
hmm
So the other thing that I noticed that both of you do a lot is use of arrows. And
hmm
so, and even like these kind of, twisting, winding arrows. Could you talk about your use of arrows?
Yeah, actually, I think Kilby and I had even texted back and forth on these particular arrows now that you mention it. Um, because it's one thing, like these arrows they're not exactly just decorative, but the ones near the top right corner, for example, those are like about something evolving and like shooting off into different directions, right? But they're not
Mhm.
connecting to anything in particular. I think you could argue that a smarter use of arrows might be for them to be connecting one thing to another in the chart itself. but those could be like two different uses. So like in a more systems thinking function where it's like a relationship between one thing and another. And you could even vary the arrow and the look and feel of it to tell us something about that relationship. Um, and another one is kind of this, where it's like the one at the bottom is this
Yeah.
like overarching arrow talking about coordination and coherence and between multiple diverse parts, right? But I don't know if that's making sense, but those are like two different, very different uses of these big swoopy arrows, right?
No, I get it. It's almost like arrows is like a standalone element on their own rather than just this connects to that. It's like there's
Hmm.
a flow here, there's a dynamic that's happening here that stands alone, that's independent of what's around it. Right? It's almost like there's some sort of motion and it's like they become their own through lines in the charts.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
they're super cool. Um, okay, let's take a look at another one. Yeah, I'm guessing this is a digital.
Yeah.
All right. So can you walk through your process on this one? And I'm just going to point out this is an IF one, so that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. You're going to be
Yeah.
doing a lot more of those. Could you talk about your chart?
Yeah. This is a fresh one from these. There's a series of four, they're calling them Road to Monterey sessions leading up to the IAF conference in Mexico. And so this was the first one. And there's kind of some similar things going on in this one as there are in the other charts, but I prepped a template with the colors that were from the logo. So like did in Procreate, the app, you can kind of should input an image and say, please generate what do you call it? A color palette based on
Mm-hmm.
this. I find it usually tends to give you way too many options, but from there I'll usually pick, five or six or whatever number of colors and then limit it even further. So that you can see in the top left corner this kind of like stained glass looking logo with those colors, which is lovely. I think it was interesting because I sort of took the most like desaturated ones from there. Like you could go a totally different direction with that same color palette. But anyway, uh, so this was a really interesting session on like how AI is redefining what, so I'm going to read the title, but what consultants and facilitators sell. And I thought it was really well structured and
Mm-hmm.
so well structured that maybe I wanted to kind of bring in some more swoopy arrow action. And again, it's like thinking about what do you put in the center and then what goes around that a little bit, right? The landscape at the bottom is the mountains. Well, that's not really the mountain in Monterey, but some mountains. And then I had this kind of like template prepped and then added the content around that. Some of it is very listy looking, like actions you can take. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's like
Yeah.
a bunch of things you could potentially do. But I sort of like the contrast between a list and then poopy arrows. They can
Mm-hmm.
live together.
One of the things I really like about this chart, getting back to your color, is that it doesn't interfere with the text. There's I think there's a lot of charts out there that kind of look like the Sunday funnies. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
a still thing. If you still get the Sunday funnies, there's a lot of color on the page. A lot of bright red, yellow, green, blue. And these
Hmm.
are subtle. They fade into the background. They don't overpower the content that's there.
Hmm.
They're there, but it doesn't get in the way of the list, even with this green arrow that's right there.
Hmm.
This is kind of a deep cut. I don't know if you ever heard the term corporate Memphis before?
Hmm.
All right, don't worry about it. There's a specific flat illustration style that's pretty popular in business. If anybody
Hmm.
wants to check it out, you can. But it's the idea of, it's like a flatter image, and you've got a little bit of atmospheric perspective here with the mountain that's there. But otherwise, this is pretty one-dimensional. And a lot of
Hmm.
your charts are pretty flat like that. It's like
Hmm. Hmm.
it's just it's right there, and there's not a whole lot of depth to it.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if that's intentional, if that's just the way that you draw. It's the idea of like sometimes you
Hmm.
see some charts and things really recede into the background.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's interesting to hear. I think it's just the way it comes out, but I have
Hmm.
so much admiration for people whose charts are very different from mine and who feel like there's all this depth and kind of dimensionality. And I'm always like, how do people do that with markers on a board?
I don't know how
So
they do it
maybe
either.
it's just a natural style thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you talk about your people a little bit? Because I've noticed you have, I think you've got about three people that you like to draw. There's this
Yeah.
silhouette kind of guy, and then you've
Yeah.
got the really long-limbed, round-bodied people that I've seen Kelvy draw. And then
Hmm.
there's one other that we'll see in a minute. But could you talk
Mm.
about like your people here and how you choose one versus the other?
Yeah. I these are kind of stolen from a dear friend and colleague, Alfredo Carlo, and
Oh
they're a
yeah.
sort of modified version of the what he calls Keith Haring people.
Uh-huh.
Um, and these are like Keith Haring people doing things, like passing a box from one to the other and thinking and talking and cheering in the corner and trying to read a map. And these are just fast and efficient, but I kind of aesthetically prefer them to some other options.
Hmm.
And they're nobody in particular. They're like way over on the abstraction scale of
Right.
like could be kind of anybody, although they all look pretty able-bodied, but they could be they're kind of just lumps.
Yeah, okay, so that begs an interesting question then. Do you ever get somebody who asks you to draw something very realistically? Maybe that's a speaker portrait, because, again, something that you and Kelvy have in common is that you tend to draw more on the abstract side of things, right?
Hmm.
Kelly says she does that because she can't draw. I think that's ridiculous. I've seen her draw. She draws very, very well, right? I think she just
Hmm.
kind of chooses not to.
Hmm.
But what happens if you get somebody who like wants something in a style that's just not yours?
Hmm. I will do speaker portraits if this thing is specifically requested and if it feels like important to the client and to the group and there's a reason for doing it.
Hmm.
I will never suggest it. I don't actually like include that as a thing that I recommend. I don't have anything in particular against it. I think it's actually lovely. It's just not my super strong muscle. And also I just want to hear, I'm really interested in what people have to say and like what we
Yeah.
might learn by coming together that we didn't even totally expect to learn by coming together. And so that's a kind of different territory to focus on rather than like which is it's kind of another art form in itself to do like incredible portraits and that kind of realistic stuff is it's so beautiful. But I'm like passable at it. But you can see this is a quite a different style, right? Like it's quite a
Yeah.
different thing.
Yeah.
Um, and
No, I
yeah, I think
appreciate
it's
that.
just a different focus. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm always my heart sinks anytime somebody's like, yeah, so we have this panel that's got 8 people on it, and we want a
Mhm.
speaker portrait for each one of them. By the way, before we get off of Alfredo,
Yeah.
if you haven't gotten a copy of this book, yep, yeah, it's The Life of a Graphic Facilitator. If you don't have a copy of this, you are not living life. I mean, he documents all of those moments where you find yourself saying, I can't believe this is happening to me. And he did this as a Kickstarter a while back, but if you, yeah, I love this one, where it's like work walls, weren't you supposed to bring them with all just the stuff that you have to schlep around? Anyway, The Life of a Graphic Facilitator, highly recommend it. Thanks for bringing up Alfredo. He's awesome.
It's so good. It's so good. He's so good. Total
Yeah, he
master.
really is. He really is. All right, how about this one? This one's pretty cool. A little redacting going on, so thank you for maintaining client privacy. But yeah, tell me
Yeah.
about this one.
Yeah, this is a wonderful client here in Mexico.
Hmm.
Although there were people from all over, and so that's why it's in English. And I think that like I can't remember why I put this in here. We talked about I don't care. We started talking about this session months ago, but now that I'm looking at it, I
Hmm.
think there was just something like the simple way of organizing a chart where it's like blue bubbles in a round dish kind of gathering down the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of behind you if you're on the screen, but people can hopefully see it. And
Oop,
then
let me get out the way.
I don't know what folks are looking at by the time they watch this, but um oh wow, that was magical. So the like that kind of arc down the left, an image in the middle, and then something very important over on the right. And then actually what felt like a key thing to me from the session is sort of nestled in the corner, which is like it says the world is a nest to tend or tend
Yes.
to, not an egg to break. And I honestly didn't really have space for that by the time we got over there. And if you could argue that I could move things around because it's digital, but it's like sometimes, I don't know, do you have this experience? Like somebody says something that kind of like brings the whole thing together and is really important, but it's maybe like kind of quiet, but
Hmm.
you like needs to get in there. And it's not in the center because it just didn't fit there by the time I heard that. But but it's almost more like in this grounding kind of position or like this holding where the people are. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that begs an interesting question because again, if sometimes you hear these ideas that are not necessarily in the main arc, but they're just so
Hmm.
good that you want to include them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, traditionally people do call outs, they'll do, talk bubbles or things like that. Um, one of the IFEP conferences that I went to, I got to see about 12 different graphic recorders all recording the same panel discussion at exactly the same time. And the thing that was fascinating to me about it is that when you saw their charts at the end of the session, they were totally different from each other.
Hmm.
Not just stylistically, like they'd recorded different content, right? And the thing that blew me away on that one was that graphic recording is somebody's internal listening process made visible, right? It's
Hmm.
extroverted listening. And the thing is that what happens is that we bring our own bias to it in terms of what we think is most important. So something like that, the world is a nest to tend, not an egg to break. That's something that it sounds like it hooked you. It would certainly hook me. And I'd be like, all right, that is so cool that I'm going to give it a position of prominence on here, whether or not it's part of the arc of the discussion that's there.
Hmm.
By the way, I couldn't help but notice that the nest is another one of those like those micro metaphors, right? That
Mm.
Kelvy will draw too sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh, she's got nests all over the place. So the other thing that's neat, if I could kind of zoom in on the style of this chart, one of the things that I've seen you do and Kelvy do, and I think a lot of people have picked up on that, is the idea of doing kind of a color fill behind text, especially when you're working digitally. And especially one that doesn't necessarily, for lack of a better word, fit the text that's there, right? Like this isn't a banner that neatly fits around this thing. This isn't a box that goes around it. It's just kind of like a blob of color that's there. So how did you pick that one up? Is that something you've developed or where did that come from?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question, Brian.
That's all right.
But I do know that I like it. Um, like it makes me happy, and I don't feel like they need to exactly fit each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like for things to kind of go a little bit outside the like coloring outside the lines or going a little bit beyond the edge of the bubble or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of like that slightly off kilter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know who I stole that from. I'm sure I stole it from somebody. Just like I stole the letter R from somebody and the letter G from somebody else. Like we like steal things from each other.
Can we talk about your R's and your G's?
Yeah, if you want to.
So I have a feeling that your R's and your G's were inspired by architects' hands.
Mm,
The lettering style, and the reason for that is that if you can imagine like working at a table with a T square and a square, architects will use the vertical for their lines. Okay, and so you typically see wide drawn out letters on blueprints and things. And so that's where
hmm.
you get like that long kick of the R, of the
Yeah.
leg of the R. You see that on K's, you see that on L's. So if you check out architects hand, like I had this conversation with Kelvy and she denied it. She's like, no, I didn't have anything to do with architects. I'm telling you that's architects hand. I will bet my life on this one. And
Mm,
especially the C, how flattened out that is. Um,
hmm.
anyway, I don't have to convince you. Just check it out, see what you think. As long as I'm over here, I did want to talk to you about this, okay? Because this is a this
Hmm.
is this is a bold move, right? Um, most of the time when we write, we try to make things as legible as possible, right? And one of the things
Yes.
that I was taught is that if at all possible, try to avoid writing on the angle, okay? Now
Mm,
you don't do it a lot. You might do it 2, 3 times on a chart, but when you do it, it's very, very intentional. So
hmm.
what's going on here? This is beyond just squeezing something in, right? I've seen you do this in places where you didn't have to do it, right?
Hmm.
So why would you arc text like this?
I think you're right for emphasis. Like it
Mhm.
marks a difference, right? Like it's if there's contrast, then I think our eye is going to go there. And for me, I think I'm usually listening to like, okay, what are the objectives of this gathering, for example, right? That's what's in blue, and we can all agree on that. And those are on a slide anyway, but like you could include them, and it's kind of an easier flag. And but then there's like some other level, like so why are we have our objectives of why we're coming together, and then there's like some sort of maybe bigger possibility of what might happen or what's needed or like this larger call. And so collective action is this kind of like
Mm,
we need to take collective action. We need to come together. What is this moment asking us to do? Is sort of a flag for that. And so I feel like that's sort of because of listening at different levels, or kind of pinging at different levels, and then seeing how those things need to fit together,
yeah,
and then emphasizing, like you can, I think, and what do you emphasize? What do you include, and how, and what do you emphasize is such a key piece of
it
scribing,
is. Yeah, yeah.
and what it can do for the group,
Mhm.
because then it's an attention thing, right? Like, and our attention is so under so much duress these
Mhm.
days, that like, what do we call attention to, and what's possible here? It's like people have gotten on airplanes to fly to a place, and no one has any time. So once they're there, it's like, what is maybe the larger potential of being there?
Yeah, so really dialing on it. Here's what we want you to take away from this. Okay, I got
Hmm.
one other question about this, because
Hmm.
here's the other thing where we're like, oh, here's the thing. You break all the rules really, really well, right? So I'm kind of curious as to like how you do that.
Mm.
You've got a right justified title, and I never see this, right? There's a title
Mm.
on the right. You're like, what? A title on the right? Nobody does that. But clear, I mean, it's still a very readable chart, right? This doesn't break my brain to have it
Mm.
over here. So tell me about putting the title on the right.
Mm. Yeah, again, I think it's just one of those things that I kind of, I don't know, I don't always do that. I don't do that as a rule.
Right.
But I'm curious, like, yeah, I guess I'm curious what's your read on that, if anything. Like, if it works, why does it work? I think in this case, it's the only thing that's white on a very bold,
Right. It's
very
very heavy.
square black. So it's the only thing at that weight, right?
Yeah, it's very heavy, and it's like, okay, that's where my eye goes first, right? And that's where you
Mm-hmm.
want the title to be, is wherever it starts. Sophie says it works because of the black background. Yeah, it's the heaviest thing
Mm-hmm.
on the chart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, cool. Let's move on. But before we do, I just want to point out what Tim said in chat, where he says, I grew up with architects in design school, and that looks like architect style. So there you go. All right.
Mm. I absolutely love that. I mean, I could look at the kinds of lettering, and what are they called? Like architectural drafts. I could look at that
Yeah.
stuff all day. Like, don't you just love
Yes.
looking at it? And it's
Yeah,
also kind of a dying art, isn't it?
yeah, we could, well, I mean, we're among the few that are keeping it alive to some extent, right? I mean, just
Mm,
talk to Heather Martinez and all the work that she's done around lettering.
exactly.
All right, and now for something kind of different.
Hmm.
Thanks for dropping this in. Yeah. Tell me about this. This is so cool. Nobody does that.
Yeah, I don't know if they should, but we did. This is a gathering, a beautiful gathering, organized by folks at the Presencing Institute,
Mm,
from people from all over Latin America and elsewhere. Um, and so I was working with another dear friend in Scribe, Jesa from Brazil. So she was actually on the wall, just
mm,
out of it's off camera, but on the left, she was scribing in Portuguese. And I was scribing Spanish, mostly in Spanish.
mhm.
And at some point, we just like things started to. Um, she was so organized, and like had things laid out in a certain way from the beginning, and it stayed that way. And I was just like moving things from A to B and running from one session to another, and the boards gave me the freedom to kind of shuffle things around, and this is how they sort of ended up. But things started to just sort of feel like they needed to spill out onto the floor. And Otto Scharmer was at this gathering, and he was talking about
Whoa.
the social soil. And so the thing on the ground that says suelo, that's soil in
Right.
Spanish, and he was talking
Hmm.
about like caring for the soil and the ground. And it was really beautiful, and it felt like it shouldn't be, trapped within the confines of the 90 centimeter wide paper, and needed to just go somewhere else. So we started cutting and making roots and doing all this fun stuff.
I love it. It says relations, attention, and conversations. That's lovely.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
love it, just like the boundary breaking that's happening
Hmm.
here. Getting outside the confines of, four sides of a chart. It's super cool.
Hmm.
Let's see what else you got in here. This is so fun. Okay, close up of that.
That's the same, yeah, same stuff. And you'll also
Mhm.
see that there are like, I went off the colored outside the lines, I went off the sheets of paper, but then the sheets
Mhm.
I had multiple layers on a single cardboard. So if you look kind of in the top right corner, you can see some strokes that are from another drawing, but they're on the cardboard, which I also think is kind of
Oh,
fun to just say, like, how does this maybe relate to the new drawing that's on that board? You know, just just geek stuff, just
Yeah.
nerd stuff.
No,
Yeah.
totally. And that's what this is all about. So thank you. All right.
Those are the
This is from
same
the
ones.
the same ones. Yeah.
Yeah, those are cleaned up. So that's like how they look in post.
Hmm.
And here I decided to keep the boards in some of them. Like that's the cardboard edge on the right, right? So
Hmm.
in the photo, it was like, I think this needs to be here. And so some of them didn't feel like they need that, like the one on the left, and some of them did.
Right. And I love, to your point, I love how the marker sort of spills off the page onto the
Mm-hmm.
cardboard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I tried that on the wall once. The facility people didn't really dig that
They weren't
very much.
into it? Yeah.
Not
Weird.
too into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, they were tearing the building down. I figured it'd be fine. It's a true story.
That
Um,
sounds like a massive opportunity to like do something on the walls,
that was
no?
my thought too. I was like, well, we actually ran out of paper. So I was like, okay, we'll just draw on the walls. They were tearing it down. In chat, Tim says it's a wonderful exploration of space.
Mm.
That's cool.
Hi, Tim. Thank you.
So here's your kidney beans again. It seems like that's
Mm.
part of the vernacular. That's part of this whole thing. You mentioned the Presencing Institute, and of course, Kelvy and Otto Sharma have worked together for years and years and years. It seems like the that design vernacular sort of is reinforced by the Presencing Institute and Theory U and all of that, and it kind of goes back and forth. It's
Mm.
almost like a virtuous cycle of like, well, where Otto Scharmer is coming up with these ways of describing things.
Mm.
And then Kelvy and you are saying, all right, well, and here's how that looks when these things are actually
Mm.
visualized, right? Here's how you illustrate it. And then, I've seen him take some of those ideas and then work it back into the theory. So when he talks about things like the iceberg or the literal swoop of the theory U, right? So how do you find, you mentioned presencing. How do you find presencing itself working its way into your work?
Yeah, no, I love what you're touching on, this kind of like dialogue and relationship between the theory or the work
Hmm.
that somebody's doing, not necessarily in a visual format or in different visual formats, and then what describing as a social art, like they call it, and how those two can kind of become different spaces and influence each other. Jace is also another such a beautiful scribe and a person who does a lot of work with the that I would really recommend people. Maybe I'll put it in chat.
No, thank you.
Jace. Um, take a look at Chase's work.
Yeah.
It's so very special. I think this kind of work invites us to connect to like a deeper source in ourselves and in the collective, and that makes your drawings different
Mhm.
because they're just kind of coming up from a different place, like a different well. And so you could come at this a lot of different ways. And there was tons more excellent content that we could have like captured if you like during all of
Right.
these, right? Like it's not like there wasn't so much more that could be on these boards as well.
Yeah.
But it's like there's something about like the precision and the like quiet. So the one on the left is from a Arowana Hayashi with the social
Hmm.
presencing theater, wonderful, beautiful human being. She was talking, and so like she talks a lot about stillness and movement, right? When she's like a dancer, you're thinking about theater and things like that. And so the stillness you could kind of equate to the empty space on the board, for example, right? Or like the
Hmm.
pause between the beats in music or things like that. And so, like we were talking about at the beginning, the empty space is full of
Right.
potential and meaning and possibility and doesn't always need to be filled, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
You are, and
that's
it's,
yeah.
let me just say, like, it takes a huge amount of discipline to not draw. And I know that sounds weird, right? But it's like there's this, I don't know, there's this feeling like, well, they paid me to show up and draw, I better draw. That's my job, right? And yet, when
Yeah.
you leave the empty space there, and it's like you're providing a space for people to fill with their own ideas. How,
Hmm.
I'm just curious, for these conversations, do you know about how long of a chart this was? And I'm talking about time, right? Was this a
Oh
couple of
yeah.
hours? Was this all day?
No, these were probably a couple hour blocks or maybe even less. They're quite large sheets of paper.
Yeah.
Um,
See, that's
yeah,
still
this was not,
incredible to
yeah.
me because if I had 2 hours, right? A typical 10-foot chart, that's usually the size that I draw at, would be densely filled, right? I have
Yeah.
a really, really, really hard time leaving empty space like this. I mean, you have on this one, I don't know, maybe 8 big ideas that are here. So it's just I don't have that discipline. I need to work on that to like just capture less. But me, I get so
Well,
excited. That's a good idea. Let me write that down.
it's not always appropriate. I mean, this is a very particular context, and I think I would like call us to discernment because I think I'm sure that what you're doing is right for the context because you're a master and you know who you're working with and what they need, right? And probably also very open to feedback on that. And so this is like a really specific thing that I definitely don't always do.
Mhm.
Definitely wouldn't recommend for every single space. Cool, Tim. Tim's sharing something in the chat too from
Yeah,
a
let me see if
session
I
with
can
audio.
grab that. I'll pull it up so we can all take a look at it. Let's
Yeah.
see.
Um, So I think that is important to touch on and like discerning what's needed in the time and in the place for those specific people is important to me.
I think I did this right. So this was the one that Tim was looking at, and he says, here's one we did with Otto Sharma and his systems work. Tim says, I love your interpretations of his work, more gestural. Your work and Kelby's always inspire this. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And like,
Beautiful.
yeah, Tim, this is awesome. No knock. And again, I think that this is a little bit more traditional of graphic recording of what we usually see versus what we were looking at just a second ago. You know,
hmm Yeah, I love it.
thanks for
I
sharing,
mean,
Tim.
that's the thing is like there's a lot of sophistication in the theory and the frameworks that obviously Otto is sharing at any given time. Something I also like to think is like, is this available somewhere in all of its full glory and
Mhm.
beautiful details? How
Right.
can I complement that? And like, what's enough, right? Like the question of what's enough content, color, whatever in this moment for this
Hmm.
particular group of people is important to me. And some
Yeah.
stuff you're just like, I can't even fit all that in
Yeah.
here. So,
Yeah.
but Tim did such a beautiful job of like getting a lot of content in there, right?
Right. I'm going to go out on a limb here and see if I can draw a line between the two different styles. Okay. So to me,
Mm,
I would call this visual note taking. It's the service. It's in service of the memory of the group. This is so that you can remember. Okay, what are the different parts of theory? What are the 3 divides? It's so that I can go back and look at it as a memory anchor, as a reference. I would call this visual note taking.
hmm
I'd call this generative scribing. Right.
mm,
This
hmm
is this is this is at a different level. Right. It serves a different purpose.
Yeah. And I do lots of all kinds of different things, but this for
Yeah.
me is like you know, we do lots of things where it's like this needs to serve a specific function and we need to remember things about this meeting. So let's write them
Right.
down. Yeah.
Right.
Because I'm not always just drawing like 2 shapes in the middle of a floaty empty chart.
No, I got it. Well, I mean, you did want to show it off. By the way, are we nerding out too
Yeah.
much right now? Is this getting too geeky for you? No. All
Probably
right.
not for me, but maybe we should
Amanda's
ask
shaking
other
her head.
people.
Amanda's
Yeah.
shaking her head. Sophie Alexis, she says, this is great. Okay, let's talk about white on black because I think like that's something that you guys just own white on black. Okay, everybody's got to stop doing white on black. You guys have got this one. So can you tell me a little bit about this chart?
Yeah, this is the main reason I wanted to I love that, Sarah. Dude, are you new here?
Yeah,
We
that's
come for
great.
the nerding up.
She is new here.
Um
I warned her. I don't know if she believed me.
I was warned. The main reason I wanted to share this one actually is this is from Kelvin and I were teaching together with Jace,
Mm.
and this was actually done on 5 flip chart, the black Neuland
Yeah.
lovely flip chart size. So I think it was like we were at home teaching COVID and didn't have like a particularly big or end-ish of COVID, but didn't have a big wall to be working on at that time. And
Hmm.
so I worked on small and then patched them together digitally
Mm.
afterwards, which is kind
Mm.
of the fun thing that I wanted to share because I was experimenting with that more during the pandemic, maybe, but like it's almost like mixed media if you count analog and digital as 2 different things. And then I was like drawing over top of things under them on my iPad and took a ton of liberties because really what my job was more like teaching and I was just kind of doing this as an experiment in the space. But um yeah, just inviting myself, first of all, to remember what I was doing at that time, but like to go analog, then do whatever you want digitally. It's like the world of possibility.
Yeah, this one's amazing. I'm going to print this one up and put it in my studio. It's gorgeous. It's
Cool,
really, really,
thanks.
really great. Well, and besides that, it's also I think it's a really good summary of Kelvy's book, Generative Scribing, right? It's got, most of the theory from that is in here somewhere. So it's a good reference for it as well. Um,
Yeah, thanks. That's why it's five, because it's five domains from the model of practice. So it's actually not random. Sophie's in here, I think, too, because you and I had a conversation
right.
during that course, Sophie. Yeah. So like I think your name is in there somewhere little. Um, yeah, but so that's why it's like the being, joining, perceiving, knowing, and drawing or doing at the top. But
Mhm.
those are the five domains, and that's why there are five sheets. And that's the way that course is structured as well, which is obviously that's all Kelby. And I was just um, yeah, just being respectful of the structure.
You're going to have to let us Nova Scribes know the next time that you and Kelvy get together to teach a class. I'll be there. That's awesome. Um,
Thanks. Yeah, you're very welcome.
thanks for sharing this. Oh, Tim's got another one. So he says, hope not oversharing here. Another sample work for auto from Contrast, inspired by your minimalist nature, Reilly. Okay, hang on. Let me grab it. And let's take a look at that one. Big file. It's loading, it's loading, it's loading. And I think if I did this right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
Mm.
Tim, do you want to talk to this one at all? You're off mute, but we can't hear you.
Hey Brian.
Hey, sorry about that to throw you under the
Hey
bus,
Kelly.
but yeah, talk about this. Did you do this one on a, it looks like a, no, that wasn't, I was about to say it was a whiteboard, but it looks like it was just a not great lighting when you shot the photo. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, no, that's a large board, right?
Uh-huh.
4 feet by 8 feet. Uh, it's yeah, SG 100 Futures Lab. So this is,
Okay.
with some of the typical work, or at least that I've known and done with auto, with the three different stakeholder groups, right? The business, government, and NGOs or civil service in
Mhm.
Singapore. On imagining the future 100 years, right? Singapore is at 60 birthday, so what's the next 100 years? And so he's laying out his some of his main themes you might recognize there.
Hmm.
Riley, the eco versus the ego, the use of
Hmm.
resources, the embodiment, the U theory kind of swooshes. So I mean, when I'm doing this, anytime I step into the room with Otto, I've had a few opportunities with him over the years, and yeah, my brain always switch, like as scribes, we're a bit of a sponge, right? I mean, that's the joy of these sessions is nerding out and seeing different styles. So when I'm in the room with him, I'm automatically kind of in the zone of Kelly's work and your work, and because that's kind of Otto's translation in a way, or vernacular visual voice, if we can say it, with Jace and Kelby. And
Hmm.
I've seen them and worked with them a little bit. So I'm kind of stepping into that mindset while I'm in the room with him. So I'm maybe in some level trying to mimic that a little bit, So I'm thinking of some of your work, probably looking at it or Kelly's work while I'm, in the room with him. And I'm trying to like minimalize my style in a
Mm.
way while I'm doing, while I'm there capturing this. But anyway, it's also so it's a merger, of my style plus some of Kelly's work and your work.
Hmm.
I guess so. Um, yeah, but so there you see some of the big swooping arrows
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
some of his content that I'm familiar with representing it. But there's also, I guess I'd bring in a lot more kind of models and like to create visual structures of like what's ahead and what's below and what's kind of in the past or in the front, that kind
Hmm.
of landscaping or mapping or something, I mean, which we all do. I don't know. So there's
Yeah.
there's a mixture of styles going on there.
Well, I think that like
That's what I
what
was
you're
trying to
something
share.
you're pointing to, Tim, is really cool, which is like how does our work maybe enter into dialogue with each other? Like I love
Mm.
so much the idea of the social field, if you like, or
Yeah.
inspiration, kind of cross learning, even if we don't have a conversation with each other about even if we don't have a conversation about it with each other, which we could, but how it becomes a kind of conversation through our work, and you pull from the work of other scribes and
Yeah.
read it and absorb it. You know what I mean? And it's like that seems like a really kind of unexplored, exciting thing to me.
Yeah.
Mm. Thanks for sharing this, Tim. I tried
Cool.
to do
Hmm.
Otto's Theory U class during COVID, and I tried to describe it, and I couldn't do it. It was like trying to describe for Eckhart Tolle. You know, it was just one, your mind just kind of
Totally.
blows up. You're like, what did I just hear? Way too concrete for him. Anyway, we
Thank
got
you.
just a couple of minutes left. If you're just joining us, welcome. You're in the right place. I've shared a couple of resources of Reilly's in chat, so you can check out her Instagram and her LinkedIn. She does have a couple of things that she offers. Are those so the intro describing the scribing essentials? Are those workshops?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Those
Mhm.
are intro describing is those are both self-paced um, workshops, and we put a lot of love and thinking and ourselves into those courses, Kelby and I and Jace in those two cases, and there are others in that same kind of suite of things created by other people as well. And the intro describing is what it sounds like. So that's a fairly intro level one where we get to talk about like markers and paper and how to structure the chart and levels of listening. And so it's kind
Mhm.
of a whole pack of really excellent stuff if you feel like you want to get started with scribing or come at it from a slightly different perspective if you maybe already do it. And scribing essentials is what this image is from. So it's the moving through the domains from Kelvy's model of practice. And I can, of course, highly recommend reading her book.
Mhm.
Um, and that's kind of going deeper one. So it's like if you've been scribing for a while, I would more so recommend that second one.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
That's the scribing essentials one. And the book we've been talking about is, of course, generative scribing. I mean, mine's all, it looks like a cookbook. It's all marked up with stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like that's the back page of mine as a reference. Yeah, this one it just needs to be on everybody's shelf. It will, no matter how
Yeah.
long you've been doing this,
Yeah.
it will take your listening to a level you didn't know you could get to. Highly, highly
Yeah.
recommend that one.
Yeah.
Um, Cool. Well, we're just about at time. I think we can probably squeeze one more in. How about we make it this one? Do you want to
Oh.
talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, you could almost call it something else, but it was made in the moment with a group during the pandemic, a
Mm.
lovely group in the UK, and with a dear friend Phoebe Tickle, who has a project called Moral Imaginations that I can highly recommend folks check out. It's about kind of imagination activism and our relationship to the past and the future and what we're kind of doing to keep this planet and ourselves going. Um, and so this was like a very free kind of creative space with lots of very personal storytelling. And I mean, this is about as spacious as you could and minimal as you could possibly go. So this is way on one end of the spectrum, which again is not where I always live. But um yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of this one. And it's just I think the reason I wanted to share it is to kind of invite people to experiment when you can and like be in our own spaciousness and not feel like we have to get absolutely everything down. And there are other ways of capturing and those are good too. But I think this one is, yeah, again, and my work doesn't actually normally look anything like this, but this was one example where it was a really, intimate kind of space and it didn't just felt like what needed to come out.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Riley, thank you so much for your time. Let's give Riley a big thank you very much. I will go ahead and stop the recording. Don't forget to stick around for the after party. But Riley, thank you so much. It was great having you.
Thank you so much.